Alright, so using a calculator, there's 4 things I want to cover today. First thing is the keyboard tab, second is how to solve, third is converting decimals to fractions, and the fourth thing is defining. So if you've got your calculator on you, can you just turn it on? And then you should see a screen that looks like this. Not like this. Like this. Yes? You guys see that? Lovely. Can I just get you guys to hit main up here? So it'll bring you to the calculator section of this calculator. Right, so this is the section where you'll put in your formulas, put in your how to solve equations, put numbers. It's just essentially what you're already familiar with your scientific calculator. When we go into graphing, I'll explain that later, but I don't want to bombard you guys too much about how to use this calculator. Lovely, so you should see this screen. Can you guys press the keyboard button in the top left? That is the top left of your physical keyboard, the actual buttons. Yeah. So you should see an array of keys over there, and they're separated by tabs. They're generally quite intuitive. So for example, in trig, there are trigonometric functions, lovely, so sine, cos, tan, etc. In math 1, 2, 3, that's all it's saying is that those are the buttons that generally are quite common, right? So for example, we're looking at something like, let's use my pen actually, looking at something like, there we go, square root, or looking like fractions, or looking at pi, those buttons are there because they're generally quite commonly used. Okay, so that's math 1, 2, 3. And I'll explain how to, or what buttons we're going to be using quite a lot in the future. Okay, do you have any questions about that? No? But you know we've got y equals mx plus c, those variables there. Now typically what we're going to be using is these ones at the top of, or underneath your actual directional pad. There's an x, y, and z. I can't see the order there. And we've also got a hi-hat, okay? Does anyone know what the hi-hat is? Yes, Riley. Lovely, to the power of. In this calculator, when you press that button, it does not automatically lift that number up. So using brackets is very important. I'll explain that in a future lesson. But when we have that hi-hat, it means to the power of. We're going to generally be using x, y, and z. If need be, we can also use, you see there's a section that says var, V-A-R, on your keyboard. You guys see that? Yep. If you tap that, there we go. It'll give you all these letters, A, B, A to Z, essentially, right? In preferable situations, you will only use X, Y, Z. However, these also work. So for example, if the question uses some letter besides X, Y, Z, and you want to maintain that in order to minimize confusion, you can absolutely use these, but we'll explain that in a moment. Do I have any questions about how to use this so far? No? Lovely. Now we're going to go into solving. So if you go back over here, can I get you guys to tap interactive at the top there? Interactive. Now interactive, there's a section that says advanced. Can you click interactive and then advanced? It'll show you a mini menu. And then next, this is not coming up very nicely on the camera, I do apologize. And it's also backwards. Anyway, I want you to hit solve. So that should be the first option there. You should get this screen over here, a little window. Now, when it says solve, you want to try and keep it as solve. Just leave it as solve. We won't really use solve numerically at all. So keep it as solve. And what it says is the first one says equation, and the second tab says variable. Okay? What does variable mean in this situation? So we're solving. What does variable mean? Lovely. We're solving for the unknown number. If you were to put in an equation, let's say 3x plus 9 equals 2 or something like that, and you're asking to solve x, you would leave it as x. However, if you put in 3y plus 6 equals 2, and you leave it as x, the calculator is not going to know what to do. So that variable is what you're telling the calculator to look for. You're saying, calculator, I want x equals to blah, blah, blah at the end. So the equation is what you would put in. So let's say, just for example, I'm going to put 3x equals to 9. Right, all I've done is just use these numbers at the bottom, and then using the x and the equals there. Okay, so looking like that. Any questions so far? No? And then you just either hit enter or hit OK, and you should end up with a value like this. Now let's say you've done that, it's a really complex equation, you've done that, and you realize, oh no, I've typed one number wrong. Right, you don't want to have to go through that process, type it all out again. What you can do is you can just go back up here, tap it. That's not what I meant to tap. Tap the actual equation so your cursor is blinking there. You guys can see that? Let's say that it actually meant 4x. I'm going to go ahead and highlight 4, and press 4. So highlight 3 and press 4. So now it says 4x. I know it's backwards, I do apologize. But can you guys see that? Yes, lovely. I'm gonna hit enter again and it should refresh and gives me a different answer. Now it says x equals 9 over 4. Okay? Now on your calculator, your scientific calculator, you guys are familiar, there's a S to D, right? There's an S to D button that converts fractions and decimals. You guys aware of that? Lovely. On this calculator is in the top left of your digital screen. There's one that says 0.5 and then an arrow to a half fraction. If you make sure your cursor is on that answer there, so you could highlight it and then hit that button there, it'll convert it into a decimal for you. Okay? Do I have any questions about that? No? Just a reminder that you need to make sure that variable is the actual variable you're looking for. Lovely. What was the last point we're looking for? Defining. So, you've got something like this. Let's say you're working with an equation. You guys have seen those equations where the questions you've got. This is the equation, solve for this, and this. Yeah? It's really difficult to try and copy it every single time. What you can do, there's two things you can do to mitigate that. Let's say I've got a really complex equation, or in this case, I'm just going to use the first line we've got. Okay? What I'm going to do, I'm going to drag my cursor over it. There we go. Over it, so it's highlighted. And when you see that little box down there, that's where your next typing line is going to be. Yeah? I'm just going to go ahead and drag that down. Lovely. And it copies it in. So drag it down. Whatever you've highlighted, drag it down and it'll copy it in. That's it. Okay? And then you can go ahead and change that, or you can change whatever variable, whatever it is, and then hit enter. It'll treat it like a new line. Okay? Now you can do that, or you can define. So this works if you've got like 3 parts of the same question, but if it's a really long one, you can define. So does anyone know what defining is? No? In maths, you guys know that if I give you an equation, you say, let x equal to the number of fences around the school, or something like that, right? Essentially the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and go to interactive, and the very bottom, at the very top, interactive, and then at the very bottom of the interactive menu, I'm going to hit define. It's really hard to hit it backwards. No, I missed. There we go. And you should end up with this screen over here. So you've got the first one being function name, second one being variable, and third one is expression. Okay? So now we're working with expressions, not equations. So equations are like, for example, 3x equals to 4. Now we're looking at f of x equals to, etc. Okay? So you guys have seen f bracket, x bracket, right? Yes, no? So if we're looking at, for example, this equation f x equals to 3x squared minus 1. Let's say, for example, what does the fx mean? Function, f stands for functions, lovely, and it's in terms of x. That's what the bracket tells me. It means that whatever value I have in there, whatever variable, sorry, we're using x. So if I had, for example, f of y, I would end up, that's not a y. I would end up with 3y squared equals to 1. 3y squared minus 1. So that is f of x in terms of f, the function, is in terms of x. Okay? Now when you're presented with this screen here, the function name f, typically you leave it as f. Unless you have multiple equations, we'll just leave it as f. Now, the variable is x. So you guys remember late last year, in Head Start, I told you guys substituting. For example, if I have f of 1, then we just replace x with 1. You guys remember that? No? That's all right if you don't. So variable is the x, and let's put in an expression. So let's say I've got x to the x squared plus 1. And you can see what I've done here is I've got x, and then I've done the hi-hat, 2 plus 1. Okay? So now I've got x squared plus 1. If you hit OK, just double check that you've actually got x squared plus 1 and not x to the power of 2 plus 1. So you can see once you've entered, it actually brings it up to the next level as a power. Lovely. And you should be able to get a screen that says done. If you don't, then something's gone wrong. Everyone got done? Yeah, awesome. So from there, what it means is that if I put in f of x, f3, f of whatever, it will tell me whatever value it is. So we know that on paper, let's get rid of this. Let's say that, what was our equation we put in? X squared plus 1, was it? Yeah? Okay. So let's say our equation x squared plus 1. If I had f of 3, I know that I'm substituting instead of x, I'm writing 3. So 3 squared plus 1, which just gives me 10. Yeah? So theoretically, I should be able to do that with any value, right? I'm going to do that on the calculator to save me time. So I've got this over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to math 3. So that's the one on our keyboard. Over here, math 3. And then there's an F over there. So I'm going to hit F. Okay? Now remember, it's F in terms of. So F bracket something bracket. Yeah? So F bracket X bracket, something like that. So I'm going to write F of X just to double check it's all working good. So I'm going to write X bracket X, and it looks like that. Just F bracket X bracket, yeah? If I hit enter, it should give me the equation I just put in. So you should get x squared plus 1. You okay with that? Lovely. Now I'm going to start changing the variable. Let's put in 3. So I'm going to hit F bracket 3, and you should get 10. So you guys can see what we're doing. Essentially, we're just putting values in, right? But what happens if the value gets really stupidly difficult? Especially because, well, this equation is more simple, but if we get something extremely difficult, what if I had to put f of 10,000, right? So let's go ahead and put f of 10,000. And you should look like that. And if you hit enter at the bottom, you'll end up with your value right there. So that's defining. Now, it's really important that you understand how the defining works, because if you define a function and you forget about it for the next question, let's say, it'll keep it in its calculator memory. You need to make sure you either A, overwrite that definition, as in go through the step again and say, okay, f of x equals the blah, 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 or clear it. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to go to action. So that's the one next to interactive at the top. And then go to command. So that's the one at the bottom now. So action, command, and then you should see a tiny menu there. I want you to hit clear A to Z. So it should look like that. Clear A to Z. Once you've done that, hit enter. It'll say done. And now, if I'm going to do the same thing as before, write f of x, it gives me just f of x. It no longer has an expression attached to it. Do I have any questions about that? No? Awesome.